So there's another one here from somebody who is asking for a startup offer to be evaluated. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of run down what's happening here. So what this person is talking about is essentially a base salary of 150K. There would be a sign-on bonus of $20,000 cash right off the bat, and there are stock options of which there are 55,000. So it's important to know what that number actually means, right? So 55 stock options is essentially an arbitrary number that you need two other pieces of info for. One of them is the amount of shares issued and the valuation. So thankfully over here we have that information. And if you were to divide, 38.5 million by 25 million shares, you would get the valuation of each share individually. And that essentially means that is the amount that investors bought shares at, and the shares issued is the number of shares that were bought across all investors, right? So what that means, if I were to calculate it, again, is 38.5 million divided by 25 million. That's $1.54 per share, right? So what they're saying is that the valuation of the 55K is, and you just multiply that by 55,000, you would have a valuation of $84,700 of options, right? So with that said, that kind of has about the same value of, something like SafeMoon, in the sense that you have stock options in a private company, which, stocks don't exist in a private company, right? For someone who's totally new, a company needs an IPO or essentially to have gone public and have a stock for you to be able to have stock in it. This is just equity. So when they say shares, it's just a part of the ownership of the company. And it doesn't really mean much. It's something that if you are an investor, you should be ready to lose the money that you put into equity. There's a few ways that you can make money off of this, but they're not common, right? So one of them that is the most simple in my opinion is if the company were to go public after it had been founded and after you've got these shares, then essentially the idea is, oh, your shares will turn into stock and you'll be able to sell it at some amount, right? And you're being offered the stock options at a current rate, which for this person was 154, right? That is the simplest way to make money off of equity, which, again, these things are not common considering how many startups happen. It's not common for them to go public because, again, most fail, and those that don't fail don't necessarily want to go public and won't necessarily go public for whatever reason. There's kind of two other common situations that I'm familiar with, and then there's a lot of edge cases. So another situation is being able to resell within the company. Perhaps there's some event that allows you to sell to other investors when a new funding round happens. You're able to put your shares up for offer. So let's say there's new venture capitalists who want to buy some shares in this company. When they buy it at a new fixed rate, you can be one of the people who is offering the shares to be sold. And the third option is if the company is bought out, oftentimes there can be a payout for the equity. So for me, I don't really shoot for equity as much. I kind of take it with a grain of salt because there is kind of no certainty around it. And again, it's about as reliable as of a currency as crypto, or probably even less, because if you were to buy Bitcoin, it might tank, but it's worth money. Whereas equity is essentially you get this instead of money, and a lot of companies will try and push it that way. Oh, you should work for us and you should accept equity. And if you're not willing to accept equity, then that just means you're not really behind the cause. I don't know how often that's happening these days, but that used to be more of a thing in the past, and it's insanity. It just is a way for companies to not pay like in the past. These days, they kind of want to offer it as like a stake in the company. So I personally always think that I take options with a grain of salt. And you always want to prefer other things to options, whether that's like additional benefits, a sign-on bonus, a different salary. That's kind of how I look at it. It's always what risk are you willing to take, and are you willing to put, essentially that much money in replacement into something that may or may not work. So that's something to consider. So with that said, this person says take or pass. And I think really, in my opinion, it depends on what they're getting now as base. It sounds like last base is 240K. If your base is 240K, if you have an offer for 270 base pay, then I think it is quite frankly insane to take this instead of that, unless there's some, it says I would say it's a lot of money on the table, so it's something to consider. If the company that is offering way more is one that you can enjoy your work experience at, 100% I would pass on this and go forward on that one. Something to consider when it comes to equity and offers.